Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're embarking on a journey, really getting into the weeds of the accessibility code for Riyadh City.
hmm
Think of this as your express route to understanding the really essential bits for creating truly inclusive urban spaces.
Absolutely. We've got the full guidelines here.
And our aim is to pull out that vital knowledge, everything from, how streets and parking are designed, right down to the nitty-gritty of building interiors, even specific rooms like playgrounds.
It's about seeing how a major city plans for literally everyone.
And this isn't just a quick skim, is it?
No, no, not at all. It's a pretty detailed exploration of how these guidelines tackle a whole range of needs and abilities. So for you, our listener, who's looking to get up to speed quickly and thoroughly, this deep dive should offer some, well, maybe surprising, but definitely practical insights. You get a real sense of the thinking behind it all.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. How about we begin with something pretty universal? Car parking and drop-off zones.
Good place to start.
Now, this code, it seems to go way beyond just saying provide accessible parking. I noticed this interesting split between accessible spaces and limited mobility spaces. What's the thinking there?
Yeah, that's actually quite insightful. It recognizes that needs aren't monolithic.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum. So accessible spaces are specifically for people with documented disabilities,
Yeah,
often using modified vehicles. They need that specific permit displayed.
right.
Limited mobility spaces, on the other hand, are more for folks who just need a bit more space or time. Think families with strollers, maybe someone on crutches temporarily.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Table 1 in the document actually lays out the minimum numbers needed based on the total parking. And interestingly, places like hospitals, they have to provide a higher percentage of the fully accessible ones.
Which seems logical, yeah. And it's not just about how many spaces, right? The code gets into how they should be marked, too.
Precisely. The signage is key.
Yeah.
It has to be mounted vertically high enough to see, but crucially, positioned so it doesn't block the path to the space.
Right.
Figure 1 in the code actually shows good examples of where to put the signs around the bays. Makes identification easier.
And then the bay itself, the physical space.
Yeah, the surface has to be firm, smooth, stable, easy to roll on,
Mm-hmm.
and the slope, this is critical, maximum 2% gradient. Both running slope, that's front to back, and cross slope, side to side.
2% isn't much at all.
No, it stops wheelchairs or even strollers from rolling away unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And another thing, they mandate a pedestrian pathway at the front and rear of all bays for safe movement around the car.
Right, safety first. Okay, so that 2% slope, that really shows the level of detail. What about the actual size, the dimensions of the bays? Must be specific.
Oh, definitely. The code spells out minimum dimensions for parallel, perpendicular, and diagonal spaces. And importantly, this includes mandatory access zones. That striped area next to the bay?
Yeah, the extra space.
Exactly. Driver side, passenger side, sometimes the rear, depending on the layout. Absolutely vital for getting a wheelchair or walker out.
Makes sense.
And the code even differentiates between ideal dimensions and minimum ones. It kind of acknowledges that older buildings doing renovations might have less space to work with.
Okay, a bit of flexibility.
A bit, yeah. But some things are absolute minimums, like headroom, 2,750 millimeter clear height outdoors,
Yeah.
2,600 millimeters indoors.
That's quite high.
Well, it has to accommodate those taller adapted vans people might use.
Right, good point. So that's a relief for anyone driving one of those. Now, going back to those limited mobility spaces, same size rules apply.
The basic bay dimensions, yes, same minimums as perpendicular accessible spots, but there's a slight concession for renovations.
Oh.
If space is really tight, the code might allow a shared access zone between two adjacent limited mobility spaces.
Ah, okay, so one striped zone serving two bays.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a compromise, but it still aims to provide enough space.
Okay, a practical touch there. What about drop-off zones? They're super important for quick access.
Totally. They need to be located really close to an accessible entrance. And ideally, they should have shaded waiting areas. A nice touch, especially considering Riyadh's climate.
Definitely.
Surface rules are similar, firm, stable, max 2% slope. The key thing is that access zone has to be on the passenger side.
Right, where people usually get out.
And there's a minimum overhead clearance too, 3,600 millimeters. Again, for different vehicle heights. If there's a curb there, a curb cut is absolutely mandatory for smooth transition.
Steps.
No steps.
Hmm.
And they even specify dimensions for on-street drop-offs. Minimum 5,400 millimeters long, 3,900 millimeters wide. That includes a hefty 2,100 millimeter wide access zone. Plenty of room.
Wow, that is a generous amount of space. Really emphasizes ease of use. Okay, let's shift gears and move outside the building itself, thinking about external spaces. Paths, street furniture, crossings. Path width seems like a really basic starting point.
Fundamental, absolutely. The code says accessible external paths need a minimum clear width of 1800 millimeter.
That sounds quite wide.
It allows two wheelchair users to pass each other comfortably or someone with a guide dog and another pedestrian.
Okay.
Now, if space is really an issue, they permit a minimum of 1200 millimeters, but only if you provide passing places.
Passing places, like little pull-offs.
Exactly, little widened areas, minimum 1800 by 1800 millimeters. And they have to be no more than 30 meters apart.
And I see here, shaded and set back.
Yeah, shaded is important for rest and set back so they don't become obstructions themselves. Another key detail, path edges should use a contrasting color or texture.
Why's that?
Crucial visual cue for people with low vision. Helps them stay on the path safely.
Ah, right. Those subtle things can make a massive difference. What about hazards, obstacles along these paths?
Address carefully, both overhead and ground level. Minimum clear headroom is 2100 millimeter, so no low-hanging signs, no rogue tree branches.
Okay.
At ground level, things like manhole covers must be perfectly flush. No lips or edges to trip on or catch a wheel. And any large openings beside the path. Strictly forbidden unless properly guarded.
Yeah, you wouldn't want a cane tip getting stuck. Makes sense. The code also mentions uneven surfaces, cobblestones and things like that.
Precisely. Those irregular materials like cobblestones or loose gravel, they're just not suitable for accessible paths.
But what about historic areas?
Good question. If they're part of the historic character, the code says you must provide an alternative, level, stable, accessible path nearby. You can't just leave people stranded.
Right.
Even with regular pavers, the gaps, the joints between them are regulated. Max 6 millimeters wide for square edges, 13 millimeters for beveled. It's all about minimizing trip hazards and making it smooth for wheels.
Wow, down to the millimeter gaps. Okay, what if there's a drop-off next to the path, like a slope down or a retaining wall?
Edge protection is vital then. If the drop is between 200 millimeters and 600 millimeters sort of curb height up to a low wall, you need a color-contrasted curb, at least 75 millimeters high, a tactile and visual warning.
And if it's a bigger drop?
Over 600 millimeter. Then you need a proper guardrail compliant with the Saudi building code standards to prevent serious falls.
Safety is definitely paramount. Now, walking longer distances, places to stop and rest become really important, don't they?
Hugely important. The code says resting places should be provided max 50 meters apart on accessible paths.
Okay.
Each one needs enough clear space for a wheelchair, a firm level surface, and again, it should be shaded. Offer some relief from the sun.
And set back from the path.
Set back slightly, yeah, so people resting aren't blocking the flow. They even specify minimum dimensions 900 millimeters width for the wheelchair space within it, and 1500 millimeter minimum depth for the whole rest area. Make sure they're actually usable.
It's those details, like the shade, that really show a user-focused approach. What about other stuff we see on streets? Benches, bins, lights.
That's street furniture, yeah. It should be placed adjacent to the path, never reducing that minimum required width.
So off to the side.
Right. The code actually encourages clustering things, benches, lights, planters together, keeps things organized.
You make sense.
For benches specifically, they should ideally have armrests, helps people sit and stand. They need to be fixed securely, shaded, and always have clear space next to them for a wheelchair user to sit alongside.
And lighting, essential for nighttime navigation.
Absolutely critical. Minimum 100 lux illumination level across the whole path network.
Okay.
And it should be uniform, white light, high color rendering index so colors look natural. They specifically discourage uplighting, which can cause glare.
Right, that can be disorienting.
And they even mention minimizing light pollution for new installations. Thinking broader, even things like bollards, those posts to stop cars, they need to visually contrast with their surroundings, different color, texture, or contrasting bands so they're easy to spot.
So every element is considered. Now, that transition point sidewalk to building entrance that can often be a tricky spot, how does the code handle that?
Yeah, getting that smooth level transition is crucial. If there's just a single step, the preferred way is to gently slope the external area leading up to the door.
Okay, ramp the approach.
Basically, yeah. For bigger level differences, they suggest things like sloped landscaping or maybe lowering the landscape area beside the path with a clear curb or guardrail defining the edge. But importantly, the cross slope in these transition areas can't be more than 2%. Keeps it navigable.
Got it. Ramps are obviously a common solution too. What are the key rules for external ramps?
The code recommends an ideal gradient between 4 and 6%. That's fairly gentle.
Uh-huh.
Maximum allow is 8%, typically in trickier situations. If the ramp rises more than 150 millimeters overall, handrails are mandatory, both sides.
And specific heights for those?
Yep. An upper rail between 875 and 925 millimeters and a lower one between 600 and 750 millimeters. Caters to different heights and needs. Edge protection like a low wall or a guardrail is also mandatory to stop wheels going over the side.
Right.
And they require a color contrasted strip at the very top and bottom of the ramp. Visual cue that it's starting or ending.
Makes sense.
Oh, and if the ramp is wider than 2 meters, they recommend double handrails in the middle too. And landings are specified 2 minimum sizes for straight, L-shaped, and U-shaped ramps to allow for rest and turning.
Sounds like a lot of thought goes into making ramps safe and practical. What about external steps? Another common feature?
Uniformity is the absolute key word for accessible steps. Rise, the height of each step has to be consistent, somewhere between 125 and 180 millimeter.
Okay. Yep.
And the depth of the tread, also consistent, between 280 and 350 millimeters. No variations.
Makes them predictable.
Exactly. Material must be non-slip. Each tread needs illumination, minimum 100 lux, especially for night use. And there needs to be color or material contrast between the tread, horizontal part, and the rise, vertical part. Helps define the edge visually.
So no confusing patterns.
Pattern surfaces are discouraged, yeah. Visually confusing. Circular stairs, generally not allowed on accessible routes. Big flights of stairs need handrails and landings, minimum headroom of 2,100 millimeters above the steps, and crucially detectable warning surfaces at the landings.
Those tactile surfaces again, tell me more about those.
They're vital for people with visual impairments. The code specifies 2 main types, truncated domes and horizontal strips.
Truncated domes, like little bumps.
Yeah, small, raised, flat-topped bumps in a grid pattern, usually used to warn of a hazard ahead, like the top or bottom of stairs or the edge of a crossing where it meets the road.
Okay. And the strips?
Horizontal strips are raised parallel bars, often used to indicate a direction of travel or sometimes just to warn of a change. The code gives really precise dimensions for both types, the size, the height, the spacing, ensures they work consistently.
Got it. Speaking of crossings, making road crossings safe and accessible is huge. What are the key rules there?
Number 1 principle, maintain that accessible path gradient right up to the curb cut. Smooth transition, no jarring bumps. Those truncated dome warning surfaces are mandatory right at the edge where the curb meets the road. The code details the dimensions for the curb cuts, the length, the angle of the sides, the flares.
And the little drop from curb to road.
Strictly limited. Maximum 10 to 15 millimeter level change. Minimizes tripping. And, really important, the curb cut can't narrow the adjacent pedestrian path. You still need that clear width.
Right.
And if you have multiple curb cuts, like crossing a median, they need to line up. Straight line of travel.
Medians, those refuge islands in the middle of wide roads, they can feel much safer. Does the code mention them?
Yes, absolutely. It says medians or refuge areas should be provided wherever feasible on wider roads. Let people cross in stages. They need to be big enough for a wheelchair user to wait safely inside them. Surfaces need to be drained, no puddles. And there are minimum width and depth requirements specified to make sure they're actually functional.
And for crossings without traffic signal?
Uncontrolled crossings, yeah. Truncated dome tactile warnings are required at the waiting points on both sides. And a minimum width for that waiting area is specified too.
What about raised crossings, the ones that are like speed bumps across the whole road?
Yeah, raised crossings are good for slowing traffic and often mean you don't need steep curb cuts. But their edges have to be super clear.
How so?
Visually and tactily distinct from the road. The surface material should look and feel different. And you need a continuous strip of those truncated domes along the entire raised edge as a warning. Minimum width for the crossing and depth for the tactile strip are also specified.
Okay, let's broaden out again. Landscape, open spaces. Accessibility isn't just about concrete and asphalt, is it?
Not at all. Green spaces are important too. The code encourages trees for shade along paths, but with caveats.
Like what?
No branches hanging below 2,100 millimeter. Avoid species with nasty thorns near paths or ones that drop large, slippery seed pods, things like that.
Practical considerations.
Yeah. And when planting in parks, the design needs to integrate smoothly with ramps and paths. Landscaping should help, not hinder.
And kids' playgrounds. Inclusivity, there must be a big focus.
Huge focus. The code stresses variety play options catering to visual, auditory, tactile senses. Different physical abilities, too. Critically, at least 50% of the ground-level play equipment has to be universally accessible, meeting standards like those from IPEMA. Fixed shading overplay areas is also recommended.
And sensory needs.
Yes, they encourage things like wind chimes, talking tubes for audio play, and also cocoon-type things, swings, hammocks that offer a sense of security for some kids.
Nice touches. What about the ground surface?
Crucial. Needs to be firm, stable, level, non-abrasive, and fast-draining. But under the equipment itself, you need softer, impact-absorbing surfaces for safety if kids fall.
Makes sense. It even gets into specific plant choices?
It does. It points to the Riyadh Trees and Plants Guide for suitable local species. And specifically says, avoid planting spiky succulents right next to accessible paths where someone might brush against them. Ouch.
Right, yeah. The level of detail is just, well, incredible. Let's move indoors now. Building entrances. Where do we start?
Okay, entrances. For new buildings, the rule is simple. All public entrances must be accessible, full stop.
And for older buildings being renovated?
A bit more complex. The primary entrance must be accessible, plus at least 50% of any other public or staff entrances.
Okay.
And there needs to be a clear, accessible route from the disabled parking spaces to the entrance. That means drop curbs, firm surface, max 2% slope, those access zones around the vehicle.
Got it. And making the entrance itself easy to find and use.
Clear signage is paramount. Building address at the main entrance. Directional signs at the accessible entrance isn't the main one. Protection from weather is recommended canopies, recessed entrances. Good exterior lighting, minimum 150 lux, plus a lit transition zone just inside. Color contrast is key again between the entrance area and the path leading to it.
And glass doors.
Need easily seen strips or markings at eye level so people don't walk into them. Inside, plain, light matte colors for walls and ceilings to reduce glare. And for big glass facades, the door frames themselves should contrast, making the doorway obvious.
What about the door arrangement itself, like double doors?
Yeah, for climate control, double door airlocks are suggested. Minimum 1,200 millimeter clear space between the inner and outer doors.
Okay.
And sufficient maneuvering space in front of the doors is critical for wheelchair users. The exact dimensions depend on the door type, swinging, sliding, and how someone approaches it.
What's the preferred door type?
Automatic sliding doors are preferred for accessible entrances. They should have sensors that open them early enough, fully open when you're about 1,400 millimeters away, and stay open long enough. And again, markings on the glass.
What if sliding doors aren't feasible? Swing doors.
Automatic power-assisted swing doors are the next best thing. Operated by a push button, usually 750 to 1,000 millimeters high. You have to consider the swing direction carefully, though. Don't want it swinging out into a busy path without warning. Might need guardrails sometimes.
Where are these mandatory?
Building entrances, accessible toilets, family rooms, changing places, and main internal circulation routes, unless the door is always held open anyway.
Are there other types?
There are manual power-assisted ones, still needs a button push, maybe set back 1,400 millimeters.
Yeah.
And standard manual swing doors, but the code doesn't really recommend those for main entrances or external doors. Wind can make them hard to open, heavier effort needed.
And revolving doors.
Generally a no-go for accessibility.
Yeah.
Unless they're huge, slow-moving ones that meet with requirements, you must have an alternative accessible swing or sliding door right nearby.
Okay. And the floor level at the entrance, that threshold?
Critical point. Maximum threshold height is just 13 millimeter.
Ideally.
Completely flush.
No step.
Exactly. If a tiny level change is unavoidable, max 15 millimeters, and it needs a gentle slope, chamfered edge, if it's over 5 millimeter, steps at entrances should be avoided entirely. If they exist, you need that alternative accessible entrance.
So if there are steps, a ramp or level entry elsewhere is essential. What are the go-to solutions if an entrance does have steps?
Well, the main thing is providing that alternative accessible route. Could be an internal or external ramp, max 8% gradient in retrofits, or maybe an internal ramp combined with power-assisted or automatic sliding doors. A recessed porch area can also help create that level transition zone. But whatever the solution, the floor surface must be flush with the threshold. No things like coir matting that can snag wheels.
Right. Let's talk about internal ramps then. Within the building, key rules.
Max horizontal run for one ramp section is 9 meters before you need a landing. Cross slope, minimal, max 2%.
Landings?
Level landings needed top and bottom, ideally 2,100 by 2,100 millimeters for maneuvering. Could be reduced to 1,500 by 1,500 millimeters in exceptional cases. Intermediate landings are needed for longer ramps too, with specific sizes for straight, L, and U-shaped turns.
Handrails again?
Yep. Double handrails if the ramp is wider than 2 meters. Same heights as external ones, upper 875/922 millimeters, lower 600-750 millimeters, and edge protection, like a minimum 75 millimeter high curb along the sides.
Got it. Okay, moving further inside, the lobby or foyer area, what makes that accessible?
The logical layout, plenty of space. Clear signage is crucial directions to reception, lifts, stairs, toilets. If there's a reception desk, it needs a lowered section, visible right away. A building map or directory in an accessible format is good practice. Clear sight lines to routes leading to other floors. Seating near the entrance, including wheelchair spaces, and definitely a clear maneuvering area right at the reception desk.
And glass walls or partitions?
Need markings, like we discussed for doors. And if the building uses gates or turnstiles, there must be at least one accessible hinged gate, minimum 900 millimeter wide.
What about places where you have to queue? Lobbies, service points?
Need enough space. Minimum 1800 millimeters clear between the desk barrier and the queue line itself. If they use those rope barriers or fixed rails, they need a top rail and a bottom tapping rail less than 150 millimeters off the floor for cane users.
Ah, okay.
Base needs to be non-trip, and the barrier should visually contrast with the surroundings.
And the reception desk itself, specifics there.
Needs to be easy to find and approach. Unobstructed path, signage if it's not immediately obvious, visual contrast between the counter, floor, walls, clear maneuvering space on both sides.
And the height.
2 heights are specified. A lower section, max 760 millimeter high for seated users. Needs knee space underneath, min 700 millimeter high, 500 millimeters deep for the customer, 650 millimeters for staff, and a standing section, 950, 1100 millimeters high.
How wide should the lower section be?
Minimum 1800 millimeters wide. And the counter depth with that knee recess, minimum 700 millimeter. Edges should be rounded for safety. They even suggest a double knee recess option for flexibility.
Very detailed. Okay, let's move on to general internal circulation corridors, internal ramps, stairs, corridors first.
Okay, corridors. Minimum clear width, 1200 millimeters, ideally 1800 millimeters for 2 wheelchairs passing.
Slopes.
Running slope, max 4%. Cross slope, max 2%. Any doors opening into the corridor should be recessed so they don't swing into the path.
What if there's an unavoidable obstacle?
Absolute minimum clear width is 1000 millimeters, but only for a very short distance, and the obstacle needs guarding. Narrower corridors need passing places, those 1800 by 1800 millimeter areas, every 30 meters if the corridor is less than 1800 millimeters wide.
And at corners or junctions?
Need turning areas, minimum 1800 millimeter diameter circle for wheelchairs to change direction easily. And if a corridor slopes more than 4%, it's officially a ramp. It needs to follow ramp rules max 8.3% in renovations. Curved ramps. Avoid if possible.
What about things sticking out into the corridor, like fire extinguishers or signs?
Yep, protruding objects. Anything with its leading edge between 650 millimeters and 2100 millimeters off the floor, that's the main zone people detect, can protrude a maximum of 100 millimeters.
And below 650 millimeters.
No limit, essentially. Assumed detectable by cane or foot. If something wall-mounted sticks out more than 100 millimeter, it needs guarding or color contrast and can't reduce the clear path below 1200 millimeter.
Overhead.
Minimum 2100 millimeter clear headroom. If it's less, you need a detectable barrier underneath it, firm, color contrasted, maybe railings, with its leading edge at least 650 millimeters high, warning people before they hit the lower object.
And stairs off corridors.
Should ideally be set back, not opening directly onto the main flow.
Okay. Internal stairs themselves. Dimensions and design.
Same principle as external.
You want?
Uniformity. Rise 125, 180 millimeters, run 280, 350 millimeters, consistent. No open risers on public stairs. Slip-resistant finish. Visual contrast between treads and landings.
Tactile warnings again.
Yep, tactile warnings at landings. Nosing the edge of the step needs color contrast and a slightly rounded or beveled edge, 610 millimeter radius. Helps visibility, reduces tripping.
How many steps in a row?
Max 12 steps between landings for a single flight. No spiral or tapered treads for public use. Minimum 2100 millimeter headroom. Avoid single, isolated steps, major trip hazard. Handrails need that 300 millimeter extension top and bottom.
And stairs with multiple flights?
Same 12-step max per flight. Intermediate handrails needed on wide stairs. Tactile warnings at landings. If it's a turning stair with more than 36 risers total, there should be a change in direction. Handrail extensions and tactile warnings apply here too.
Handrails seem critical everywhere. Let's recap the detailed specs for internal ones.
Okay. Diameter 3250 millimeter. Gap to wall 5075 millimeters. Consistent height. Continuous on both sides for level changes over 500 millimeters. Extend 300 millimeters horizontally at ends. Intermediate handrails. If stair ramps are wider than 2000 millimeters, max 2100 millimeters between rails.
Ramp handrail heights.
Top rail at 900 millimeters. Additional lower rail at 650, 750 millimeter. All handrails securely fixed, comfy grip, no obstructions from mountings. Minimum 30 points LRV contrast with the wall, and non-burning material if in direct sun.
Got it. What about lifts, elevators?
In new buildings, all passenger elevators must be accessible, suitable for everyone, including sensory impairments. Doors and sills need color contrast.
Standing area in front.
Minimum 1500 by 1500 millimeter clear, level space. Call buttons, 900, 1200 millimeters high, at least 500 millimeters from a corner. Contrasting plate buttons, embossed symbols, braille, light up when pressed. Floor indicator around 1830 millimeters high. Audible and visual arrival direction signals.
And inside the lift cart.
Dimensions vary based on door layout. There's a table for that. Doors need visual contrast, minimum 5-second dwell time. Reopening sensors at 2 levels are a must.
Cabin interior.
Materials and lighting should avoid glare reflection shadows. Control panel on the side wall, 900, 1200 millimeter high, horizontal or vertical. Visual and audible floor level indication inside. Minimum 200 lux lighting. Mirror on the back wall helps with maneuvering. At least 2 handrails inside.
Okay, a huge amount on circulation. Let's move to sanitary facilities. Toilets, washrooms, still vital.
Absolutely. Accessible toilet stalls can be within larger blocks or as separate unisex rooms. Automatic flush controls are standard now.
Doors to these.
Minimum 900 millimeter clear width. Door furniture handle. Lock needs that 30 LRV contrast with the door. Collapsible coat hook, 1100, 1200 millimeter high, max 50 millimeter projection. Lock needs to be elbow operable, 900 and 1000 millimeter high, with an emergency release from outside.
Door swing.
Cubicle doors should ideally open outwards. For outward swinging entrance doors to accessible rooms, you need a deep pull handle inside, 900 millimeter high near hinge, and a horizontal bar handle, 300 millimeters long, 900 millimeters high, inside near hinge and outside on latch side.
Family rooms.
Required at least 1 per gender in public buildings, and on every floor in assembly buildings if there are 4+ fixtures. Need power door operators. Minimum 2100 millimeter diameter clear space inside, WC, transfer space, and a fold-down baby change table.
Specifics for the baby table.
Max surface height, 850 millimeters. Mechanisms max 1200 millimeter high. Strong enough, 1.33 carry-on load. Reachable shelf nearby. Door needs 900 millimeter clear width. Enough space around the table.
And those changing places for more complex needs.
Yeah, the code adopts standards similar to the UK ones. These are larger rooms, minimum 12 silkometer. They need a height-adjustable adult changing bench, min 1800 millimeters long, a centrally placed toilet, 480 millimeter high seat, 1 meter space either side, a hoist system, ceiling track usually, large bin, non-slip floor, wash basin, ideally adjustable or fixed 2700 millimeters with knee space, shower drain, privacy screen, wide paper roll, minimum 900 millimeters clear door width.
Wow, quite comprehensive. What about a standard accessible toilet with a wash basin inside the room?
Wash basin should be beside the toilet. Closest edge, 275 millimeters from toilet front, max 400 millimeter deep basin, max 825 millimeter top height, min 700 millimeter knee space below. Needs 800 millimeters wide by 1400 millimeters deep, clear floor space in front. Accessories, soap, dryer, operable 900, 1200 millimeters high, electronic lever taps, insulated pipes, mirror top edge max 1000 millimeters high.
Okay, let's focus on the accessible stall itself. Dimensions.
Door clear with min 900 millimeter, 850 millimeters Eno. Stall depth min 1800 millimeter with min 1800 millimeter. Needs that clear transfer space on one side of the W fin 900 millimeters wide by 1400 millimeters deep. Completely clear.
Toilet paper dispenser.
Sidewall closest to WC. Below the grab bar level, min 600 millimeters high, min 60 millimeters clear below the bar itself. Positioned in line with or up to 300 millimeters in front of the toilet seat edge. Automatic flush, no spring-loaded seats. Back support needed if there's no tank lid.
Toilet height and position.
Seat top 430, 460 millimeter high. The greasy center line 450, 480 millimeter from the adjacent sidewall, leaving minimum 900 millimeter transfer space to that wall.
And limited mobility stalls.
Also need a Western-style WC.
Grab bar is crucial. Where and what type?
2 required in each accessible stall. Rear and side. Rear bar, min 600 millimeters wide, min 150 millimeter gap from end to WC center line, 800 millimeters high. Side bar can be cranked or horizontal vertical combo. Horizontal part, min 300 millimeter, vertical min 300 millimeters. Also 800 millimeters high, min 150 millimeter gap to WC center line.
Wash basins outside the stall in the main washroom area.
Minimum number based on total fixtures. There's a table. Knee space required underneath accessible ones. Need that 800 millimeter by 1400 millimeter clear floor space in front. Accessories operable, 900, 1200 millimeter high. Dispensers, dryers, max 1200 millimeter. Mirrors, max 1000 millimeter top. Electronic lever taps. Insulated pipes.
Emergency call systems.
Mandatory. Waterproof call strip on the sidewall next to the WC in stalls.
What about accessible showers?
Need min 900 millimeter clear space outside the stall. Inside dimensions, min 1500 millimeter by 900 millimeter. Ideal 1500 by 1500 meters deep. Transfer space beside seat, min 900 millimeters high. Transfer space beside seat, min 900 millimeters wide. Grab bar and emergency pull cord strip reachable from seat floor.
And if a shower includes a WC.
Similar dimensions, seat height 475 millimeter.
Urinals.
Full-length urinals preferred. Bottom lip max 425 millimeters high. At least one accessible urinal must be provided if urinals are present. Needs vertical grab bars on both sides. Center line 1000 millimeters high, 384.50 millimeters from urinal center line. 900 millimeter clearance if there are privacy screens. Clear floor space, 800 millimeters by 1400 millimeters in front.
Ablution facilities for voodoo. Special considerations.
Yes, need to comply generally. Min 5%, at least one. Accessible and limited mobility units. Electronic sensor taps recommended. Rooms near accessible rope main entrance. Need 2 horizontal grab bars at the sink, 700, 800 millimeter high length of sink. Bidet shower, reachable soap paper, 700, 1200 millimeter high. Min 1200 millimeter porch space. Floor needs to be slip resistant, antifungal, antibacterial. Any built-in benches level with circulation, no sharp edges, color contrasting.
Okay, let's circle back to doors generally within the building. Clear width is the main thing.
Yep, clear door width, measured at 90 degrees open, face of door panic bar to the stop. Min 900 millimeters for new external doors and sequential lobby doors.
Color contrast requirements for internal doors.
Leading edge contrasted if it's not a self-closing door. Door and frame contrasted to walls. Min 7 proficient LRV difference usually recommended, though the source just says contrast. Handles mechanisms contrasted to the door. Power activation pads contrasted to surroundings.
Vision panels in internal doors.
Required on corridor doors if they aren't already mostly glass. Allows people to see approachers. Not usually needed for washrooms, change rooms for privacy. Visibility zone is 500, 1500 millimeter from floor. Bottom edge min 750 millimeter. Top max 1500 millimeter. Min 250 millimeter gap from panel edge to latch side.
Thresholds for internal doors.
Max 13 millimeter, same as entrances. Flush preferred.
Door controls and hardware again, switches, handles.
Wall controls lights, 750,000 millimeter high. Remote recommended for things needing fine motor skills. Sockets 400, 1,000 millimeters high, 350 millimeters from corner. Consider extra switches in large rooms. Hardware, lever handles for latched manual doors, D-pull for unlatched manual doors. Operable one-handed, no grasping, twisting. Lever action for locks. Pivot hinges with emergency release for outward opening in emergencies, like inward toilet doors. Low friction hinges for heavy doors.
Self-closing devices. Power operation.
Low energy swing doors are good. Manual power assist modes. Power revolving doors aren't accessible, need alternative. Power operated sliding, folding, balanced swing doors can be manually activated. Pad, code, card, remote, or automatically, sensor, proximity.
Quick note on windows.
Can't open into accessible paths below 2200 millimeter. Should be shaded, but openable, with filter. Glazing down to 900 millimeters helps wheelchair users see out. Bottom of opening part, not below 1200 millimeter, child safety. Handles may be lockable out of reach on upper floors. Automatic opening linked to climate control is ideal.
Room lighting. Beyond just brightness.
Good color rendering needed. Optimize LRVs for visual contrast. Highlight hazard, stairs, level changes. Light faces well at communication points, reception. Avoid backlighting. Illuminate speaker interpreter in lecture halls. Ideally automatic adjustable. Remember, older people visually impaired often need more light.
Sunlight and glare control.
Balance natural light and shading. Keep windows clean. Be aware fluorescent lights can sometimes affect hearing aids. Magnetic field. Control glare in key spots like lobbies. Avoid reflections, shadows, harsh pools of light. Even illumination is better. Avoid uplighters.
Okay, last big section. Surfaces, walls, ceilings, floors.
Walls and ceilings. Plain, consistent colors preferred. Min 30 points LRV difference between wall, floor, ceiling helps define space. Ensure door chandelier switches contrast visually with walls. Glazed walls need manifestation markings at 2 heights, 850, 1,000 millimeters, 1,400, 1,600 millimeters. Textured walls for wayfinding. Maybe, but need clear info. Avoid reflective glossy ceilings, glare, acoustics. Edges of freestanding glass screens need high contrast strip.
Floors.
Firm, level, slip resistant, suitable for all mobility aids. Avoid shiny polished reflective surfaces. Avoid bold patterns, contrasting colors, especially stripes can be disorienting. Carpet, shallow, dense pile, fixed edges, flush junctions. Adjoining surfaces level with similar friction, visual contrast if friction differs. Texture changes can warn of hazards or give direction. Consider LRVs for contrast.
Room acoustics.
Use sound-absorbing surfaces for consistent reverberation, table and source. Hearing enhancement systems, induction loops, FM, infrared, needed in meeting rooms, 25 people, assembly areas, service counters, reception desks, theaters, etc. Display the hearing loss access symbol. Needs to work with translation systems if used.
Phew, that covers the general principles. Now, the code gets into specific room types, too. Let's touch on a few key ones. Mosques, prayer rooms.
Accessible path from entrance parking. Accessible internal routes, main entrance compliant, clear shoe removal area, rack or mat. Seating near shoe racks and within prayer hall, for those who camp in. Low pile carpet on accessible routes.
Restaurants, dining halls.
Accessible path to at least half the dining areas. At least 10% movable seats, accessible tables. Min 900 millimeter approach width. 100 lux illumination on at least 10% of area. Found reduction materials. smooth, washable surfaces. Self-service counters, 900, 1200 millimeter high. Min 900 millimeter clear passage to food service.
Auditorium set.
Wheelchair seating in groups of 2. Min 865 by 120 millimeter frontal, 865 by 1500 millimeter lateral. Level 1500 by 1500 millimeter maneuvering space connecting each. Gradient 1%. Aisle seats with foldable armrests. Marked spaces with ISA symbol. Visible space at front for sign language interpreter. Designated seating nearby for hearing impaired. Accessible toilets within 150 meters.
Libraries.
Min 10% accessible. Study, carols, fixtures, fixed seating. At least one. Min 1 accessible checkout lane. Min 50% accessible computer workstations. Accessible seating tables on accessible route. Shelving near accessible seating MAC. 1350 millimeter high. Clear aisle with min 1200 millimeter.
Swimming pools.
Accessible path from changing rooms. At least one accessible water entry. Ramp. Assisted chair hoist in large pools. Open plan offices. Follow internal circulation rules. Visually contrasting floor for routes helps prevent obstruction.
Small meeting conference rooms.
Clear 900 millimeter path around perimeter. Hearing enhancements.
Individual office.
Clear 900 millimeter path to front rear of desk.
Office furniture storage.
All furniture seating compliant. Accessible fixed storage. At least one low height, direct access, obvious location. Some storage needs knee recesses. 1200 millimeter aisle. Some without. 1400 millimeter aisle.
Office, kitchens, refreshment areas.
Knee recesses under sinks counters. Storage fridges under counter. Reachable microwave. Min 2100 millimeter diameter maneuvering space in kitchens.
Car parking buildings.
Wayfinding is critical. Clear signs to disabled spaces on each floor at turns. Different symbol colors per floor helps orientation. Cars, toilets, lifts, exits. Clear separation of car pedestrian areas. Good lighting. No glare.
Retail shops.
Follow internal circulation rules. Visually contrasting floor for routes. Permanent, temporary. Lighting to emphasize routes. Movable lighting helps with layout changes.
Well, we have certainly journeyed through a very comprehensive accessibility code for Riyadh City today.
We really have, from the tiny details of a parking space gradient to the layout of a mosque prayer hall.
The sheer level of consideration for creating an inclusive city is, well, it's quite striking.
What really comes through, I think, is how interconnected it all is. Seemingly small measurements, material choices, they all build towards this bigger goal.
Making the environment genuinely usable and welcoming for absolutely everyone, whatever their abilities might be.
Exact.
And as you, our listener, can probably tell, creating these truly accessible spaces isn't just about, like, checking boxes on a form.
No, far from it.
It demands really meticulous planning, a deep understanding of all the diverse needs within a community. It's a holistic approach. It touches every single aspect of design and building.
Yeah, that kind of raises a final thought, maybe something for you to mull over.
Okay.
Considering these incredibly detailed guidelines for a major city like Riyadh, what does that mean for how we think about spaces in our own communities, our own towns, neighborhoods? What maybe overlooked or seemingly small things could we push for or even just do differently that might actually have a really significant positive impact on inclusivity where we live?